Time now to talk politics, and we'll turn our attention back to highways. As we discussed earlier in the show with Governor Hutchinson, his highway funding plan uses a combination of rainy day and surplus revenues combined with shifting some general revenues tied to cars and roads. I am joined by Rich Huddleston, Executive Director of Arkansas Advocates for Children and Families, and David Ray with the Arkansas chapter of Americans for Prosperity. I got all those in there. That's pretty good.
That's
mouthful
great.
there.
Good job.
Right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you being here. Let's begin with you, Rich. I'm going to ask both of you this question, but I'm going to let Rich go first. No new taxes, surplus funds, rainy day funds, shifting this general revenue from sales of cars as well as diesel taxes over basically a 5-year time period. Is this good public policy?
Well, first of all, let me just say that we are in favor of more highway funding. It's a good idea. It's needed for state economic development. We think the governor's proposal has some issues. In the short term, as you mentioned, it takes about $28 million out of state general revenue, and that's money that could otherwise go to things like quality pre-K, child welfare services for abused and neglected kids, after-school programs, juvenile justice programs. So that's problematic in itself, and I think it's important to remember, which nobody is talking about, is that $29 million is on top of the $242 million in tax cuts that we've had in 13 and 15, all of which will take effect in the coming fiscal year.
He says all those programs are safe, though. He says he's going to make sure of that.
Well, we've already had budget cuts for this year, and we know from data that we have that there are a number of programs that are seriously underfunded. So we know that that's not the case already for this fiscal year. So that's the short-term problem. Long-term problem is that the plan really is not going to meet the needs of highways.
David Ray, to you, is it good public policy, the governor's plan as he's laid it out?
Yes, it is. And the governor's plan is a smart plan. It's a common sense plan. And it's primarily a good policy because it resists the urge to raise gasoline and diesel taxes. Arkansans already pay the highest gas and diesel taxes of any state that touches our borders. We're overtaxed in general. We have the highest personal income taxes of any state in the South. We have the second highest state and local combined sales tax of any state in the country. And when you look around the country, there are a lot of states where the governors are trying to push for gas tax hikes, and I think the governor needs to be commended for doing the hard work of prioritizing the existing resources. You know, I think we all agree that roads are a core function of government and something that needs to be funded, but the governor has taken the smart approach to prioritize existing resources instead of going back to the taxpayers and asking them to pay more at the pump, particularly on a regressive tax that disproportionately harms lower income Arkansans.
Rich's argument, though, that it is going to harm some programs that are already out there, pre-K, K through 12 education, higher education.
No, I don't believe that at all, because the governor did not say he was going to cut anything, so that was not part of this discussion. The state revenues have naturally grown over a number of years that will help with that problem. The second thing I would point out is that these type of predictions are made constantly every time you talk about tax cuts and tax relief for hardworking Arkansans, that you know, grandma's going to get pushed off the cliff, or the schools aren't going to get funded.
Grandma's not going to get pushed
well,
off
those
the
are the
cliff.
type of
right.
predictions you hear.
Go ahead, Rich.
Well, the one thing that we know about this year already is that revenue year to date is already down 1% compared to the same time last year. And so to say that revenues are growing because of the tax cuts is, it's just not true, because we're already down 1% for this year.
Is 1% in a $6 billion budget, though? Is that dramatic?
Well, but what it means is that revenue is not growing, and so there's not going to be future revenue growth for next year, and you start adding on $29 million on top of that. And again, we already have things that took budget cuts this year. Okay, we already have things like quality pre-K that we know are seriously underfunded. So it's just not true to say that these programs are not going to be impacted. They are. It's just hard to get around the math on this after you have all those tax cuts. You add this money to it. I would also just point out that the tax cuts that were passed left out the bottom 1/5 of taxpayers, the poorest taxpayers. So they're not even benefiting from those 13 and 15 tax cuts.
All right, Roby, I'll say this real quickly. The average family in Arkansas, they have to make do with the existing funds in their budget on a monthly basis. It's a fact that since the beginning of the Obama administration, median household income in this country is still down from that. The lower energy prices that we've seen at the pump do provide some relief to families trying to bridge that gap. And so any increase in gas taxes would adversely affect, poorer or lower income Arkansans.
But I would just say that our plan was to modernize the gas tax, tie it to inflation, and do higher energy efficiency, but then to give back part of that to low-income taxpayers in the form of a state earned income tax credit. And in that way, you can accomplish both goals. You can help the low-income taxpayers that have been hurt the last couple of years because they weren't part of the tax cuts, and at the same time raise valuable revenue for highways and possibly other things.
I love that I've asked one question and we've gone almost 6 minutes on this. We could keep going on this all day, but I want to shift gears and get one more observation from both of you guys. I'll come to you first, David. The governor seemed to tie the Medicaid expansion, Arkansas Works, the private option, whatever you want to call it, the necessity to pass a plan to do that to the fact that his highway plan wouldn't be able to be funded with no new taxes as a result. Do you agree that that is the way that that would have to work out?
No, I don't agree with that, Roby. I think that Medicaid expansion, private option, Arkansas Works, whatever you're going to call it, it is a program that is fiscally unsustainable, and we have to deal with the fact that the process of budgeting is the process of organizing our priorities. And we all agree that roads are a core function of government. We have to make decisions. Are roads going to take precedence over free or highly subsidized health care for able-bodied, working-age adults, most of them with no dependents? I don't think that's the right decision.
Give you a chance to respond.
Sure, and we do know, based on even the governor's own calculations, the Stevens Group, that the Medicaid expansion through the private option has actually been a big net benefit to the state budget to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. And even if you go a number of years out, when when the Arkansas has to start kicking in a 10% match for the Medicaid expansion, even in that first year, the state is in the black. And so, so I think we have to do the Medicaid expansion. We have to keep it in place, because if you don't, all of those tax cuts that were passed a few years ago, you're going to be seeing a huge hole in the state budget, and then you for sure will see massive cuts in services if we don't get that Medicaid expansion passed to fill in that budget.
I could get you guys to circle up after we go off air here, and we could do some kumbaya, and we could fight this out a little bit more.
Yeah.
Well, all of those projections, Roby, are based on the rosiest possible scenarios, assuming that enrollment doesn't run over projections like it has in practically every state that has accepted a Medicaid expansion. It assumes that this generous 90-10 match with all this free money from Washington is going to continue. Everybody from Paul Ryan on the right to President Obama on the left has said that that's not feasible.
I got to end it there. We're out of airtime. I appreciate you both very much. Rich Huddleston, David Ray, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
And we appreciate you being here. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. That's all for this week's edition of Talk Business and Politics. As always, we appreciate your participation. Stay warm, take care, have a busy and a productive week, and we'll see you next time.